Hello, today I'm going to be painting a fairly simple landscape painting on my iPad in Procreate, and I'm starting off blocking in big shapes. I'm using the color fill tool, the rectangle with the color fill bucket on, and just blocking out the sky and where the water's going to go. You want to be careful whenever you paint something like that, with two lines, not to go right in the center. I either go up really high or really low, and that'll work fine, or just off is okay too, but never go down the center. It never really works. In general, in paintings, avoid center lines anyway. And so I'm using that color fill tool again, but I'm using freehand this time, and this means I can make any odd shapes. And I'm doing this for the sky, and it might look a bit weird, but in a second I'm going to blur it together and it's going to make a nice gradient. But I'm switching the colors from yellowish down where the sun is affecting it, mid, and a nice blue up the top, and then Gaussian blur. I always go around 50% ish or around there, and it makes a nice gradient for the sky. So now I've got my blocked in shapes. We only really have like 3 or 4 big shapes. So we have the mountain, kind of foreground rocky shapes, and the water. And for this I wanted really bright highlights, so I've gone this like bright orange. And so I've put in some highlights. The sun's obviously coming from the top left, and what I'm doing is once I have a bunch of highlights in, which I'm reasonably not that careful to put in, then I'll use an eraser just to put some details. Now, these are a bit messy. You can obviously be a little bit more tidy than that if you want to, or tidy them up later. But I generally like to try to make my painting consistent on the level of detail throughout, and build it up all kind of at the same time, or as much as possible, so I can see how it's going. If you over render a certain part, then that kind of means you have to do it everywhere, which can take a long time. So this painting took me about 30 minutes, which is quite nice for a little simple painting. But if I spent 10-15 minutes on the background, then I'd have to do that everywhere, which is not a problem. But this is supposed to be just a little simple fun exercise for me, so I don't really want to take that kind of time. So I've got the major, so all paintings have a focus, even if it's by accident. So obviously these mountains are the focus, so everything else shouldn't stick out quite as much. So these clouds, one thing to notice, I used the color fill, a medium gray to put in there. And one thing to notice, I'm using the smudge tool to make them go into the background, into the sky, which is a nice little technique to make these wispy ones. But one thing you got to be careful of when you do that is make sure you leave some edges, because if you push them all in, it's all wispy, which is not quite true, because the clouds have a mass to them, and if they're all wispy, you don't really see that mass. So leave some, not loads, but you just need a few sharp edges on the clouds, and they'll look much better. So coming forward now, this rock section on the right has a bit of a highlight too, which is quite nice. And one thing that does it kind of brings the foreground and the background together, whereas in you want to kind of avoid separations of things. So I'm doing the usually I like to paint the reflections in the water, but this is quite complicated, so I've gone to the spanner, I think it's a spanner icon up the top left, and I've copied the entire canvas. Then I've basically just moved it down, make sure clipping mask is off, and fiddled it with it a little bit. It should be a bit darker. Stick around to the end, because I actually redo this water because I wasn't happy with it, and I was a bit careless and I made a mistake. Is you shouldn't put, if you're gonna copy and paste your reflections, you shouldn't do them too early, because if I go back now and edit the sky or the mountain, I really have to edit the reflection at the same time, and you're not really gonna do that because it'll be tricky. So stick around, and in a few minutes I'll explain again why I should have left it. But you'll see I'll start to edit the mountain again and the sky and bits around it, and I wasn't happy with the water. So anyway, I'll fix that, but while I'm doing that, I'm starting to blend the foreground shadow section in. Now, looking back, I'm not quite sure this front section is dark enough, but generally, as long as it's not taking your eye away from the point, which is the highlights on the mountain, it's kind of doing its job. Now, for many years, I would make a mistake of kind of trying to overpaint areas that are not interesting and shouldn't be interesting. So the bottom third of this painting shouldn't be that interesting, because you should be looking at the mountain highlights, which is the main draw. And then maybe you look down and you say, oh, that's a nice reflection, etc. But you shouldn't really be overlooking down the bottom. And to do that, you make the bottom section dull colors, not dull in interest, but dull in colors, slightly desaturated, meaning more gray, and just a lot less going on. So you really just need to take less time on the bottom and not pay too much attention to it. And so I paint these quite messy because I don't want to spend ages on them. But if you really wanted to, elevate this more, you could spend more time on the rock cracks and everything. You can go quite nuts on the focus. So I'm just deleting some of the cloud area there and putting some effects to blend the big mountain into the sky. I'm using that Gaussian blur, so I generally use a couple of tools. It's the selection color fill and the Gaussian blur I use quite a lot, and I'm only using a brush now and again, which is not that often. And you see me fiddling around with the reflection. I don't like it. I deleted it. So that's because I've changed the top section quite a lot, and now it doesn't match. So I'm doing it again. I've copied and pasted the entire canvas. I've chopped off the section that I don't need, which is basically the sky. Now I'll move it down, turn off clipper mask, and so it's looking a lot better now. It was way too dark before, and that's because I'd lightened it afterwards, and there was no really saving it. It was better just to do it again. And before, I tried to have the smudging, so I'm using a smudge tool to blur the water a little bit. I blurred it from left to right, so I changed it this time and I went vertically, and I think it works much better this time. And it was way too dark last time, so don't be afraid to try things again. If something's looking a bit funny, definitely don't be afraid. One thing's nice about Procreate is we can have everything on one layer, so I don't have too many layers, but big aspects, 3 or 4, 5, 6, whatever layers. And then if you mess one up, if you can't adjust it, then do it again. It's worth it to do it again rather than trying to polish something that's not working. So I'm just adding a few little details here now. You could go nuts with this stuff if you find it fun, but I think that'll do. If you like this, give me a thumbs up and a sub, and I'll see you in the next one. Thanks.